Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Johnson. I am the founding executive director of Iowa MMJ. Happy Friday to everyone. Thanks for being with us. This is the first time I've done a First Friday in a long time. So good to see some familiar faces and thanks for joining to those who this might be a new topic. I think Elena already went over kind of the logistics and things, but if you wouldn't mind staying on mute while we present, that would be super helpful. Feel free to turn your cameras on. I'd love to see your smiling or I mean, frankly, if you're eating, that's fine too. Eating faces, we'll take it all. It is a lunch and learn format after all. Um, but other than that, yeah, we'll have questions at the end. Um, as I said, I'm Erica Johnson, founding executive director of IowaMMJ, and Jody Mashuk is presenting also today. Jody is the co-director of IowaMMJ's legal program. And so for those who don't know, just real quick, an overview of who IowaMMJ is. We are a relatively new organization. We were founded about 5 years ago and are the result of two longtime organizations, American Friends Service Committee and Justice for Our Neighbors, joined together in 2020 around that time period to form Iowa MMJ. And we do two things. We provide immigration legal services and we advocate for systems change by doing community organizing. So today, what we wanted to talk to folks about is ICE in Iowa. So ICE, we're going to talk a lot more about that. But I think maybe you can go to the next slide, Elena, by the way. There you go. ICE in Iowa. That's the topic today. So Immigration and Customs Enforcement is what ICE stands for. And there's been a lot of talk about immigration enforcement lately. And we wanted to dig into what exactly the entity is and how it operates in our state. So I wanted to mention also that this is an overview of ICE in Iowa, but we also have an overview of how detention specifically works in our state. And that lives on our YouTube page that Elena already mentioned. That was presented about a month ago. And so that really delves into how to navigate the detention structures of ICE in Iowa, including sort of how family members can reach loved ones once they're in detention. So this is kind of a zoom out overview, and this is all coming up because we recently put together a report about ICE in Iowa, and we will link to that later on. But with all of that, I think Jody's going to start by giving a little bit of background, kind of what we're seeing, the state of things in Iowa right now.
All right, we can go to the next slide and then go to the next one after that. So you've probably seen a lot of things just circling. It's hard to keep track of everything that's going on, but some of these things here probably sound familiar. Within even just the last few days, there have been a lot in local news about meat packing plant workers being laid off en masse. This especially happening in Ottumwa. That was the one that has kind of made the news outlet circles, where JBS laid off 200 people. Most of them Haitians, as far as we know. We believe that a lot of them were here on what the special CHNV parole program. That's the China, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela parole program. Without knowing each of their individual circumstances, of course, we can't be sure, but we believe that most of them were here on that special parole program, had valid work authorization, valid work documents. But the Trump administration did try to end this program earlier. There's ongoing litigation, but they were allowed to proceed with terminating this employment authorization for these individuals and their status. Even though probably the work permits they hold in their hands still say they're valid, with the termination of the program, they've suddenly just become invalid. So a lot of that happening in Ottumwa, Storm Lake, we believe that this is happening as well, and I've heard things in other communities that possibly in Tama as well, where a lot of people, particularly Haitians, but maybe others as well, who are on that parole program, are suddenly being laid off en masse. And of course, we hope that those individuals can find a way to at least have a consultation with someone to see if they have any other options for remaining in the United States. If not, it's entirely possible that they'll be, it's very possible they will be placed in removal proceedings if it's hard to know. They could be subject to expedited removal if they haven't been in the US for more than 2 years. And I guess I would just add, since we do think it's a lot of Haitian members of our communities affected, U.S. also just issued a level 4 travel warning for Haiti and advises its citizens not to go there. So you can do what you want with that information, but it sounds like we're super interested in sending hundreds of people back to a place as a level 4 travel warning for the rest of us. Of course, we're not here to get into how does this impact our communities and our workers, but obviously the impacts are huge in terms of the workforce, in terms of keeping communities thriving. It affects the schools if they've suddenly lost a high number of students, and not to mention the trauma it causes everybody involved, right? Another thing you probably heard about recently in Eastern Iowa was the case of Pascual Pedro, who has been here, I think it was probably maybe 7 years, and was going to a regular ICE check-in. And was detained at his ICE check-in. And then his family didn't know where he was for a few days until he called them when he had been deported back to Guatemala. Thankfully, his story has been uplifted quite a bit. And I don't know if there's much more to say about that, except to say that these are things that are happening in Iowa. Most of it goes unreported, right? So I've had a lot of people say recently, well, it's not happening in Iowa, right? But I think these things here show that, yes, we are impacted just the way other states are. We're not protected from it. And we have to keep finding ways to resist and keep lifting up these stories when they're happening and contact our officials. But we'll get more to like calls to action later. But let's move on to our next slide. And we can go to the next one. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit, since we're going to really talk about ICE in Iowa today, let's touch a little bit on what exactly is ICE. Well, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, falls within the Department of Homeland Security. These agencies were created after 9/11 and sort of did away with other agencies that have previously existed, such as like the Immigration Naturalization Service. So again, this was all created in response to 9/11, falls under DHS. And so they've got a more than 20-year history now of engaging in mass surveillance, profiling, and extreme militarism, all in the name of enforcing immigration laws. You might remember back after 9/11 and our Muslim community members being targeted, and it's been going on ever since. If you look at ICE's website, their mission is to protect America through criminal investigations and enforcing immigration laws to preserve national security and public safety. Okay, different conversation for a different day about whether that's happening, right? In fiscal year 2020, ICE deported an estimated 185,884 people. It is my understanding that was a decrease in numbers from the previous fiscal year, just due to COVID. So we're talking about mass numbers of people. Up until now, ICE has had an annual budget of approximately $8 billion. And perhaps you've already seen, if you do pay attention to immigration-related news or ICE-related news, the passage of the BBB, the Build Back Better, also, the big bad bill, will lead to a $27 million budget for ICE, plus an additional $75 million that will help make it the highest funded law enforcement agency in the government. Its budget will then surpass the military budgets of numerous countries worldwide and surpasses the entire budget of our federal prison system, if you can imagine that. Some of you may know that ICE has a long history of human rights abuses, racial profiling, warrantless searches, detaining without probable cause, and fabricating evidence. And again, for our purposes today, we're not really getting into those, but there is a lot of information and a lot of reports of those things. We see them happening constantly and hear from our partners locally, nationally, of similar things happening. So, quick overview of what is ICE. I don't know if people have questions right now. If you do, please feel free to put them in the chat as we go along, but definitely we'll have time for questions at the end as well. But let's move on to the next slide.
And so this is digging in a little bit more. So Jody's talking about the agency as a whole and kind of its history and background and the ways we're seeing it play out in Iowa in different ways. I wanted to hone in a little bit more on ICE detainers because these are one of the key tools that ICE uses to apprehend individuals who they come in contact with. And specifically, the contact happens at the local and state law enforcement level. So agencies are interacting, those agencies, the local law enforcement agencies, places like the local police, the local sheriffs, Department of Public Safety, which we'll talk about a little bit more, have different ways that they're interacting with ICE agents, immigration agents across the state. So ICE detainers are otherwise known as immigration holds. Again, like I said, they're one of the key tools that ICE uses to detain people that they come in contact with. So an ICE detainer is a written request that a local jail or other law enforcement agency uses to detain an individual for 48 hours. This is an additional 48 hours after their release date. So the person is held in custody serving some sort of local state criminal charge, and then ICE wants to hold them for an additional 48 hours after they normally would have been released for those charges in order to decide if ICE wants to take them into custody, into federal custody for removal purposes. So in many cases, ICE is using these detainers to imprison people without due process and without any charges or probable cause of any violation. And so these ICE detainers or immigration holds have caused have raised some pretty serious constitutional concerns. And we know that local law enforcement agencies across the country, including in Iowa, run the risk of litigation and having damages applied to them, being liable for damages because they honor these ICE detainer requests. And so because of this, because of those reasons, the unconstitutionality of these ICE detainers or immigration holds in the period of 2013 through about 2015, lots of county sheriffs across the country said, no, thank you. We are not going to honor these detainer requests. And that includes 22 Iowa county sheriffs who in 2014 said that they were going to refuse to honor these ICE detainer requests. Okay, next slide. So all of this is sort of setting the stage for a look back through history, I guess. So I was just talking about the period of 2013 through 2015. Jody was talking about going all the way back to 2003 when ICE was created in the aftermath of the September 11 attacks. And so now we're looking at the period of 2016 through 2020, which is the first Trump administration. So this sort of starts a period of pretty extreme anti-immigrant state and federal policies. So this was a really strong political backlash against immigrants. And this happened right after all these county sheriffs were saying, no, thank you, we're not going to honor these ICE detainer requests. So in Donald Trump's first administration, there was a lot of policy actions, things like the Muslim ban, folks remember, the border wall, rolling back DACA, TPS, scaling back refugee resettlement, kids in cages, family separation, the list goes on and on. So many of those actions were challenged in court and some never went into effect. Taken as a whole, though, the impact in the community was fear and confusion, broadly among immigrants and refugees across the state. Meanwhile, or during that same period, there were some state law developments that I wanted to mention. Do folks remember in 2018, when Governor Reynolds signed Senate File 481 into law? That was after a period of 2 years. We fought for 2 years, 2 legislative sessions against that law from becoming law, that bill from becoming law. But it did eventually pass in 2018, and it specifically has to do with those ICE detainer requests that we went over earlier. And it required local law enforcement to comply with any any instruction made in an ICE detainer request. Folks might remember recently a sheriff from Northeast Iowa who said, no, I'm not going to do that, and received some pretty heavy pushback from our state's attorney general. These are all things that are related. Another state law that I wanted to mention that passed in 2024, so last year, this is Senate File 2340. Governor Reynolds signed this into law in 2024. And this law is not in effect. I want to make sure that that's really clear up front. The law would have preempted federal immigration law by creating a new state immigration law, a state level immigration law. The law is not in effect, to repeat, thanks to a lawsuit filed on Iowa MMJ's behalf from the American Immigration Council, the ACLU of Iowa, the National ACLU. What happened was a federal court temporarily blocked implementation of that law. So it's not in effect. So of those two state laws, one is in effect, Senate File 481, and the other one is not, Senate File 2340. Now we've arrived at 2025. Here we are. Donald Trump 2.0 is what we call it around here in our office. We're up to 390 policy actions. To date, some of those actions have been held up in court, meaning they haven't taken effect. Others are working their way through the courts. I think generally one of my takeaways from these first 6 months of the Trump 2.0 administration is that the policy writers learned a lot from the first Trump administration and have developed, have gotten a little more sophisticated in their policy making, and learned how to do things differently so that they can move forward. Not to mention other changes on the different branches in government, which are facilitating some of these policy changes in ways that maybe didn't happen in the previous administration. So what we're seeing now in terms of prioritization, again, Jody mentioned some of this stuff, the way it's playing out in Iowa. Mass deportation, attacking the rights of kids and families, so things like birthright citizenship, barring undocumented kids from schools, family separation, dismantling asylum. So that's what we're seeing right now in terms of policy changes. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention real quick before I hand it back over to Jody is that recently, so I think it was March of this year, March of 2025, the Iowa Department of Public Safety actually signed what's called a 287G agreement with ICE. So this is an agreement that deputizes local law enforcement agents to enforce U.S. immigration laws. It trains them under ICE. It takes them, local agents, and trains them through an ICE training. And so I bring this up, but I also wanted to note that we know very little about what's actually happened with this agreement, despite requests for information. We don't know what agency or agents have been trained. We don't know if the training has occurred. We don't know if they're currently enacting their abilities or acting upon their abilities that they're given under this 287G agreement. Even though we don't know those things, people are making some assumptions and community members are making some assumptions. The assumptions primarily being that local police are acting as ICE agents. Local police broadly, kind of sort of in the general term, and that includes Iowa State Patrol, sheriffs, local police, kind of all levels. People are generally afraid because of all of this. And sort of zooming out again, so what you're hearing, I hope the takeaway, I guess, maybe to underscore, is that what we're seeing are prolonged attacks against the immigrant and refugee communities for years and years now. And what that's doing is causing fear in our communities. The anxiety is real. Are afraid, and this fear is intentional, and it's caused by a prolonged attack against immigrants and refugees. All right, Jody.
Okay, next slide. Well, and again, Erica was just talking about 287G, so I don't need to go over all of that again. It gave you a pretty good understanding that we know that we've entered into that agreement and we don't know much else. But I would just add that as of the end of June of this year, ICE has signed those 287G agreements with 737 local law enforcement agencies over 40 states. So yeah, definitely problematic, and very costly for local agencies, and it targets people with little or no criminal history, and really does nothing but like harm relationships between local law enforcement agencies and community members, right? It's not super helpful in any way. The only other thing I would add is if you're wondering where 287G comes from, it's from the section of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is our federal immigration law, which is called 287G, that says that the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. government, can enter into memorandums of understanding of these agreements with local law enforcement agencies to collaborate in the enforcement of federal immigration laws. Um, so aside from that kind of newest update where we don't know much information about the Department of Public Safety and what that all entails, that newer agreement, what we can tell you is that regarding immigration detention in Iowa, we have 6 county jails that have intergovernmental service agreements with the U.S. Marshals Service. And so, as many of you might know, we don't have like separate ICE holding facilities. And so what ICE does is either contract with local facilities or the federal marshals, more likely, at least in Iowa, have these intergovernmental service agreements, and then they add ICE on as a rider. And so it makes it super easy to just include ICE in there so that they can hold people on ICE holds. So that was probably a little confusing, but as you can see, we have 6 county jails that have those agreements: Woodbury, Potawatomi, Polk, Hardin, Lynn, and Muscatine. It's our understanding that collectively they can detain more than 200 people at a time. And it's also our understanding that we think that they are pretty close to those numbers. It might shift a little bit day by day, but our understanding is that they have really increased their numbers of people on holds, which is not surprising. And the reason we know this information is we have an amazing attorney on staff whose almost primary focus is almost exclusively dedicated to working with detainees. So she's been able to provide a lot of this great feedback. That's the status of ICE holding people right now. Again, just to be clear, we don't have separate ICE facilities, owned by private prison corporations or anything like that. We hear a lot about those in other states. But again, in Iowa at this point, we hold people based on these intergovernmental service agreements. And in the case of Iowa, as far as we know, these are all county jails that have agreements with the U.S. Marshals Service, and they include ICE as a rider on those agreements. A rider, R-A-D-E-R. So that's the current status. Let's go on to the next slide.
Okay. So, are you all ready for the section where we tell you what you can all do, given all the information? We're getting ready to take your questions, and I imagine there's a lot, but go ahead to the next slide, Elena. I'm going to start by talking about what IowaMMJ is doing, and these are all resources that we're going to put in the chat for you. The first one I'm going to actually drop right now is sort of, again, I think the reason we didn't want to share this at the beginning because we didn't want you all reading this while we were talking. But the reason why we're having this conversation is because we've actually put together a new publication that digs into this stuff, that digs into the fact of ICE in Iowa and what it looks like. So please take a look at this. It goes over the generalized information that we're talking about in this presentation, but it also includes the information that our colleagues Barbie and Elizabeth covered in a previous First Friday's presentation about how to navigate the agreements, how to navigate the getting a hold of your loved one if they're being held in one of the county jails that Jody mentioned under ICE custody. So super important. Take a look at that. Okay, so IowaMMJ, folks probably know that we've been really leaning into the fact that the Constitution protects everyone in this country, regardless of immigration status. And so we've just been doing a ton of Know Your Rights trainings and pushing out what we call safety planning information. So I think, Jody, are you going to drop links as I keep talking? Perfect. So we put together a bunch of materials on our website. And so the Know Your Rights materials just go over the factual information that folks have rights and how to exercise those rights. And then the safety planning materials help families walk through what they would do in the event of an emergency. So worst case scenario, somebody gets picked up at their ICE check-in, like has happened several times, as we've talked about. We really want families to have thought this through and talked it through with their families so that they know who's going to make decisions about their children, their finances, and their properties and things like that. In addition to those materials, we also have been doing a series of trainings this summer. We get so many requests for Know Your Rights trainings in English and Spanish. And we also get requests for train the trainer type trainings. So these are trainings where we teach you how to give Know Your Rights training in your own community, whether that's at your local congregation or your club locally or whatever. I think that's a link to that where those trainings are happening. The next thing I want to talk about, the next bullet point, it says rapid response and community defense teams. So we know that when ICE attacks a community, it feels a lot like a natural disaster. So similarly to how the Red Cross has built emergency response teams in communities across the state to respond in the event of a tornado or a flood or something like that, we're building what we call rapid response and community defense teams. And these teams are designed to respond quickly in the event that there's a disaster in their community caused by ICE, or in the case of, Ottumwa, like we've been talking about, in the event that something drastic happens that affects large numbers of people's immigration status and the community needs to figure out how to respond. So if you're interested in learning more about how you can either get plugged into a team that already exists around the state, you probably see the map behind me. A lot of those little white flags or tags on my map are where we have actually built teams already around the state, but we still have need to build teams in other places, other vulnerable places, especially around the state. In addition to that, the third bullet point, we've increased our immigration legal services. We've been doing what are called refugee adjustment clinics, increasing those just to try to meet the demand. Folks are calling our office more than ever because they really want help trying to figure out what their options might be or moving to a more permanent immigration status. We've also been doing an increased number of what we call advice and counsel clinics because it's really valuable for people just to talk to an immigration law expert to find out what potential pathways they might have to again, move forward through the immigration system. It could be that they don't have any options. A lot of folks have no options because there aren't a lot of options because our U.S. immigration system hasn't been updated in 40 years. 40 years, is that right? A long, long time. And it needs to be updated because the laws don't make any sense and they're really harmful. In addition to that, as Jody mentioned, we actually were able to hire a staff member to represent people who are in detention and removal proceedings, and that's been extremely helpful, not just to kind of meet that need, but for us to identify some patterns about how this is all playing out in our state. And she's been able to develop materials, which is the next bullet point, to do what we call legal orientations in several county jails. Right now, we're in Polk County, in Pottawatomie County, and working on expanding to other county jails to the extent that we have the capacity to do that. And that allows us to go in and actually talk to people who are being detained and tell them what they can expect and how to navigate these systems that are designed to be really confusing and to just sort of move people quickly without any access to legal counsel or due process. The next bullet point, accompaniment to ICE check-ins. That's something that folks may have seen in the news. Again, because we know that people are being detained at their ICE check-ins, their regularly scheduled ICE check-ins, we are there to accompany them and offering to walk with them, to just serve as a presence and security. It's not like not like we're security guards, but the sort of like sentiment of sense of security and belonging. That's something that we're offering. And if that's something folks are interested in, please do let us know. And then the last thing here, because I already mentioned the ICE and Iowa report, is mobilizing. we know that now more than ever, people need to be standing up and speaking out. And so this looks differently depending on where you are, but we're asking that people meet with leaders on the municipal, state, and federal levels. So here, what that has looked like for us is we've met with the sheriff, two city council members, a supervisor from Polk County Board of Supervisors. We've requested meetings with our members of Congress, both senators and our representative for the August recess. And we're working on circling back to state legislators who we usually talk to during the state legislative session. So if you all are interested at all in doing that, we're begging people, because what we're finding is that our elected officials don't know what's happening. Our city council members were totally oblivious to this. They didn't know. So it's important that we tell them. We're also asking for a tour of the jail. And if people want to do that, that's another thing that would be great. So you can see how your local jails are operating. And then, of course, meeting with members of Congress who are the ones that ultimately will decide what policies take effect, what bills get passed, and they need to be hearing from us, even if it feels like they're not listening, which I understand. Sometimes it can feel that way. That was a lot. Your turn, Jody.
Okay, next slide. Are we on the next slide? Okay, so calls to action. What can you do? First one, sign up for emails. We put out a wonderful weekly resistance update that has updated information. We're working really hard to keep you updated with the latest policies and things that are happening. Since January 20th, there have been nearly 400 policy updates. And so those affect many of our community members. So we're trying to keep you on top of that and let you know what action steps you can take in the moment. So please consider signing up for those. We'll get those links dropped in the chat. Join as a member, donate to Iowa MMJ. If you donate to Iowa MMJ, you can join us as a member and support our work and be a part of building a grassroots effort to make Iowa a welcoming place. So if you haven't thought about doing that before, please consider doing so. Got another link in the chat there. You can display a yard sign. We have amazing yard signs. It is, Erica got one back and back. They're two-sided. I love driving around town and seeing them. We know that they're being displayed in other parts of the state as well. We've had groups of people buy big stacks of them. So if you're not in the Des Moines area, consider getting your local community to go in on some signs. And let everybody know that Iowa does not have a place for hate, and we are a welcoming state. Also consider signing up to volunteer. We have many volunteer opportunities. There's also a place on our website to sign up to volunteer. We have an amazing volunteer coordinator, Jocelyn, who is currently trying to navigate through hundreds of people who have signed up to volunteer. So we do need you. Just know that if you sign up, it will be a while for us to get to you, but we will eventually. But check it out so you can see what kinds of volunteer opportunities we have, both on the legal side as well as on the advocacy side. Consider joining or forming a team. So we have a lot of teams that have created both rapid response teams that exist around the state and locally if you're in Des Moines. And those teams cover a variety of different things, especially in terms of like rage response. And if you're interested in being a part of that or knowing what you can do, regardless of what part of the state you live in, we'd love to have your participation. So please consider reaching out to us if that's something you want to talk more about. Erica mentioned meeting with your elected officials. Erica mentioned that we have done this. That's okay. It's good to repeat it again. It's great to do this, even at your city and your county level, just to let them know what's going on. We've had two members of the Des Moines City Council that we've met with recently, also the County Board of Supervisors. So please feel free to do that. You'd be amazed at what people don't know about what's going on. And even if it's just an informational session, it's good to let your local leaders know what's happening. And so Eric had mentioned, if you'd like to talk more about that, or how do you go about doing it, we would be happy to talk with you further about how do you go about reaching out to your city council? What are the main talking points? That's why we're here. Happy to talk with you. Same with meeting with local law enforcement and talking to them about what's going on and what you're hearing and especially if you're in one of these areas that holds ICE detainees. But it's always good to keep that in mind and to be reaching out to your local officials and to keep those lines of communication open or to establish those lines of communication. Um, and we know that can be kind of intimidating or scary, but we're here to provide resources and kind of walk you through so you know what that looks like. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out. Um, okay. Anything else on that, Erica, about calls to action?
Please let us know if we can be helpful. We've got, I think the next slide maybe is like the catch-all. Here's all our contact information. So reach out to us if you need help with any of these things. We don't expect that this comes naturally to everyone. It can be really scary to do these things. I mean, frankly, I've been doing this for a long time and it's still it still can be really intimidating. And or frankly feel pretty pointless if I'm being honest. Especially in this moment. But I'm asking you, I'm begging you to push through all of that. And if you need a pep talk, we're here. If you want to just use the agendas that we've put together so you don't have to think through what do I say or any of that, happy to do that. If you want us to help recruit people in your area because you feel like you're alone, chances are we know people in your area. We've got members all across the state. So you're not alone. We're here to support you. Please reach out if you need any help lining up some of that the advocacy stuff. So all right. Now it's your turn. Talk to us. What questions do you have? I saw one in the chat, Jane, and somebody else re-upped that. I can't remember who that was, but Jerry, you were asking about these agreements with ICE and or the U.S. Marshals. Are they optional or are they mandatory? So what we've seen is that they're optional. And I mentioned that there was an agreement that Hardin County had with ICE years ago, and maybe folks remember that. There was big news in Iowa when they decided not to continue that agreement, and then we recently found out that hey, they are now again holding people for ICE. The benefit to local jails, I would imagine, is that there's a financial incentive. They're given money to reserve beds for people who are held in this federal custody. So that's one thing to kind of chew on. Good questions.
Thank you.
What else?
You mentioned Lynn County. I live in Cedar Rapids, and I've communicated with Jocelyn a number of months back about trying to do something from Lynn County because a lot of what you guys do is I assume is Polk County. Um, and if you're going to set something up in Lynn County, I would like to be a part of that because I speak Spanish fluently. I can act as a translator in the jail, or I can do whatever needs to be done. But yeah, I would like if that's going to happen, I would like to be a part of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Do you want to send us an email at our info account, info
Uh,
at IowaMMJ.org?
yeah,
That right?
sure. Yeah,
Just to
yeah.
make sure we can follow up with you because
Yeah.
it might slip my mind otherwise.
Okay. Thank you.
We were in the process, Jerry, I'll just mention, and for other folks that are in that part of the state of working on doing these legal orientation programs at the Lynn County Jail. We have all the materials put together. We've had some initial conversations with the staff at the jail. And it's a capacity issue right now. We don't have the legal experts that are able to do it. So it's something that maybe we're looking at perhaps partnering with the University of Iowa Law School legal clinic when classes resume momentarily, probably. So that's something that we're looking at, but happy to loop you into the good folks that are doing that work too.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I'm reading your comment, Megan. Do you want to come off mute or do you want me to read it or?
Hi.
Hi.
Um, there hasn't been a lot of discussion other than just our district does not, like I wrote in the chat, our district doesn't collect information on immigration status. However, just with all the different kidnapping, I guess is the best way to describe it, at regular check-ins and those kind of things, I am very concerned about like pickup and drop off times for our students and their families. So I just was reaching out to see if you can provide me with any kind of guidance as it relates to that.
Yeah, I'm putting a link in the chat. Again, this is on our resources page on our website. This
Okay.
is a question that we've gotten a lot, Megan. What can schools be doing to protect their students and their families? And so this is at least a starting point. It's from one of our partners here in Des Moines, Law School of Sonia Paras. It talks about what schools can be doing, what the key responsibilities are, best practices. And I think, again, this is something that if this is a good start for you, but you still have a ton of questions, we would be happy to follow up with you and think through a little bit more about what we can be proactively doing. If your administrators aren't doing this, then I think then there could be a more proactive approach that folks could take as a community together. And we're happy to support you if that's something that you're interested in or you think needs to happen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Jane, that's a good question. I think that the answer is maybe. I don't know, Jody, if you want to jump in, but I think the answer is maybe because the point is bed space, holding people for bed space. And that's where, and my understanding is that that's where the money piece comes in. So it maybe, but I don't know. Anything to add to that, Jody?
No, I think you're right about the beds.
I think it would be well, so Jane, I think you're in Polk County. Yeah.
Right, Urbandale.
So what we would need to do, and I don't think we have the current agreement between Polk County Jail and the U.S. Marshals, is to really dig into it and figure out how much money they're getting, and what it could look like to remove that. I would suspect that if the writer wasn't there, then the money wouldn't be there. All of this to say though, and we could do that. That's a good idea. All of this to say though, I remember when we were meeting with Polk County Supervisor Angela Conley, and we brought up the fact that that Polk County Jail is making money off of detaining people for ICE. It was a moment where in the meeting we all just kind of looked at each other and everyone felt really gross about the fact that that was happening. So I think even just naming it with the officials who are in charge of these things and helping them sit with how uncomfortable that is worth it. But thank you for bringing that up.
And can I just ask, is it like the Board of Supervisors that signs that, or is the sheriff's?
I think they certainly have some say in it, but I think it's left up to the sheriff to sign
Okay.
those things.
Okay.
But
Thank
again,
you.
that's why it's helpful to name it in those
Right.
meetings because they do have some responsibility in terms of oversight with those things.
Right. Thank you.
Erica, I don't know if you saw we had a question about any further details on a contract with the National Guard.
I didn't see that. All right. Aspen, do you want to come off mute? No, it wasn't discussed. No apologize needed.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm just so I saw like the rumor circulating, and I have a friend in the National Guard and asked if this was accurate, and they said it was. But I was wondering if you guys had any other details of like what's planned or what that entails. Last update I got, I think I heard that National Guard was trying to fight back on how many soldiers Kim Reynolds was wanting to partner with ICE. But that's the furthest I've gotten from people that are in the National Guard.
Yeah, just a like quick show of hands. Is this a rumor that other people are hearing around the state that the National Guard is being mobilized to assist with immigration enforcement around the state of Iowa? One hand, other hands. Um, well, I ask because it's a rumor that we have heard a lot over the last 3 weeks. Couple of thumbs up, yeah. So we are hearing rumors that National Guard members in Iowa are being asked to voluntarily assist with immigration enforcement activities in the state of Iowa. This is, I don't know if somebody has a link to that New York Times article you could find real quick. Elena, I think you were the one that shared that originally, Elena. Would you mind hunting that up and finding it? So there seems to be sort of what do I want to say, like a drumbeat um, of rumors that National Guard members are being mobilized to help with ICE enforcement. We haven't been able to confirm this. We have reached out and not heard back from folks asking for evidence that this is happening. And so we're trying to tread carefully. This is why I'm sort of stuttering right now, because I don't want to engage in the fear mongering that Donald Trump needs in order to continue to perpetuate this environment of anti-immigrant ness that we're all living through and that communities are suffering through. But at the same time, we want to do all we can to be really clear with communities about what they can be doing to protect themselves. And so, number one, we know that the National Guard has been mobilized in LA already, right? We know that Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds has mobilized the National Guard multiple times to assist in immigration enforcement on the southern border over the last several years. There's another third we know. I can't remember what it was. I don't know. So at some point, we just sort of have to move in the direction of plan for the worst and hope for the best, given what we know. And so what that means for us is reminding community members that we all have constitutional rights, no matter our immigration status, and that we will defend and protect each other. And so that sort of assumes, right? Oh, the other third thing I was going to say, we know that ICE is in Iowa already. So we know the National Guard has been mobilized, and we know ICE is already in Iowa. So that means that we all need to be doubling down and sharing the basic constitutional rights and being really aware of those so that we can exercise those if we need to for ourselves or for our community members. And if that means you're standing outside and observing an arrest and just reciting the things on this red card, yes, I have one on my desk right here. I have the right to remain silent. I do not wish to speak with you or answer your questions unless I have an attorney present. That's what that means. And it also means helping families think through the safety planning and sharing those materials and helping your schools think through
What do we want?
too.
Car noises.
So, did I answer your question? I forgot what the question was. I started rambling.
Yes, you answered it. And I will say, and again, not fear mongering, but I have talked to people within the National Guard and they've confirmed this. So I like the approach of prepare for the worst and know your rights. And yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Aspen.
I have a question.
Yeah,
With regards to accompanying individuals who are going in for their check-ins, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, would you suggest, like, we work with, we provide migrant services, we work with unaccompanied children, TVAP clients, but can you just speak a little bit more to that for us? Like, what would that look like? Who should be going? What might you experience? Just to kind of give us an idea.
Sure, Roy and Leo. We've done accompaniment in the first Trump administration, and then we did we did one on Tuesday morning. And so what we know, we can say that ICE in Des Moines is doing check-ins in the morning at the federal building on Tuesdays. And so what that looks like is we show up, and for anyone who is afraid of going into their appointment alone, we offer to literally walk in with them. And that just means you're helping the person navigate security. The security guards at the federal building on Tuesday happen to be like pretty good at the words in Spanish they needed to help people navigate security, like identification and belt and phone and pocket. Those are all things people need to do as they pass through security. So we walk with them through that because it's really can be an intimidating experience. We show them where their room is, where they're going to check in, and then we sit there with them as ICE reviews their paperwork, and that all is intended, at least in part, to serve as a support, just support to the individual who's going through it and who's probably afraid or nervous or whatever. But it's also meant to send a message to the officials, the ICE agents, that this person is not alone, and we expect them to be treated fairly, and we hope that they will come out to be able to rejoin their family or their community or whatever. In the event that a person is detained, likewise, it can be really helpful to have a person who is supportive there, to have already talked with them before they go in about who's making decisions about their family members, their property, and their finances in the event that they're detained, getting the number of their lawyer and having that on hand, and all of that kind of safety planning type stuff done ahead of time, so that if the worst happens, Rogelio, and a person is detained, then we know who to call, and we know, who's making decisions about the kids, all of that kind of stuff. So we could talk more about that if you want. If you want to join us on Tuesday when we go, send me an email, and happy to have you.
Thank you so much for that. The other question that I had centers around the Pedro case that you mentioned, where the individual was detained and then was removed from our country. Like, what does that look like? Is that like a very, very short time frame, obviously, that the family was not made aware because he didn't have access to a phone, all of those things. So is that like a 3-day turnaround sort of situation? And then also, is that like a trend that we're seeing in this state that's happening to families?
Good questions. I mean, I don't think we can probably speak to the particulars of the case, but there's yesterday, the Des Moines Register and the Iowa Capital Dispatch had some additional reporting. They were able to talk to Pascual Pedro on the phone from Guatemala, and he shares personally what that was like. And it sounds like, from what he said, from what I read, and from what I've heard from the advocates who were trying to support him in that moment, that it was very quick. It was 100% unexpected. And he went days where no one knew where he was, and he wasn't able to communicate with anyone. So that was, Rogelio, your question about like what happened, and the answer is I don't know, but that's what I heard. And then the second question is, broadly speaking, is this a pattern that we're seeing? Jody, do you want to speak to that?
Well, again, every case is unique, right? So that's what makes it hard to talk about or describe patterns when it comes to removal. We could do a whole separate thing on just expedited removal or what's happening. So it's hard to identify patterns at this point. I think the short answer is many people are in a vulnerable situation. I think he was in a particularly interesting situation, unique situation, where he did have, I believe, like an order of removal, but I'm not the one that represented him or anything. And it was sort of like, instead of just removing him when he and his father first came, they were like, okay, well, you can stay here for now and check in. So it's not that necessarily everyone is in that status. But it's almost sort of like the same people who said back in the beginning, okay, like, you do have this order, you're subjected to this order, but we're going to let you stay for now. We're now like, hey, you know what? We're going to send you back, and we're not going to let you talk to anybody, or like, it's cruel. So every case is unique. It can depend on many factors. How long have you been in the country? And that will really determine if you are subjected to expedited removal, where you're not placed in removal proceedings and don't have a right to due process, or if you're not. So it's hard to just sort of make blanket statements about, what are we seeing? And even if people do have a right to due process, it doesn't mean that that's being recognized, right? So I'm probably not making a lot of sense, but there's so much to take into account with each individual person. And, if somebody is detained and they do, they're not removed immediately and they do have a right to due process, then it's a question of, do you want to try and drag it out longer to fight? And we're seeing a lot of people who are just like, no, I just want to sign my deportation orders, right? They don't want to continue to be held in ICE detention. The flip side of that then is, where are they going to be detained or deported to, right? Are they going to be deported to their country of origin? Is that a somewhat safe place for them to go? Or are they going to be deported to a third country that they have no ties to, don't speak the language, don't know at all? So there are a lot of factors that come into play when somebody is detained, and whether they're going to immediately be removed expeditiously, or if they do have access to due process, and if they do have the right to go through removal proceedings, and then what happens after that. It's every case is unique. It's really hard to just make blanket statements about any of it, because it's all so nuanced at this point, and we have to be concerned about people's safety, even in the face of deportation, obviously. So how's that for a not helpful answer?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I think if you want to dig into some of the analysis of the data for those who are interested in really geeking out, I put a link to one of the scholars that I find helpful who's really digging into that. And this is the link to this particular article is a part of the third part of a three-part series that look at the way that ICE arrests have changed since the beginning of the year. And it looks at the increase that happened when there was this sort of arbitrary quota that was 3,000 arrests a day that was put out at beginning of June? Is that when it was? Man, that was a long time ago. So it just shows, I guess the punchline is that the arrest numbers, the daily arrest numbers are going up. And it talks about kind of the different types of charges or lack of charges that might be happening. I don't know that it goes into deportation yet, but it's looking at the numbers of arrests. All right. What other questions? You have 1 minute left.
Looks like we have a question about, do we need to worry about DACA at this point?
Oh.
Great question.
Yeah.
Another question that's hard to answer. I think that in a certain sense, we should always be worried about DACA, right? Because the program is 13 years old now, and it's been through so much that it's sort of always been on shaky ground. And we know that's always been true. The most recent thing that came out about DACA, and this might be what you're referring to, Aspen. Sorry if it's not, but feel free to go off mute. But there's a new USCIS director who took over that role within the last 2 weeks. And then within 10 days, so about, 5 days ago, he decided to make some sort of statement that people with DACA should self-deport. I don't really know what prompted that, unless he was just trying to show, hey, I'm the guy in charge now. I'm going to make some sort of radical, fear-mongering statement. Right now, on August 1st at 1:00 p.m., nothing has changed with DACA. We're at the status quo right now, which is you can continue to renew your DACA status. There have been so many court proceedings going on, and the most recent one was out of Texas. That's a case that's been going back and forth forever. And in theory, people should be allowed to do a first-time DACA application based on that Texas ruling, but nobody seems to be doing that. USCIS doesn't seem to be doing that. Nobody really knows what's going on. So if anything can be said, it can be that DACA remains confusing and on shaky ground, but nothing has changed. And I think we have gotten a few calls from people with DACA recipients in our office since Joseph Edlow made those comments. that people should just self-deport. But we've told him, I don't know why he is saying that, except that I personally believe it's just to continue the fear mongering, just to raise that fear in people. But but other than that, no other DACA updates. We will be sure if and when there is something on DACA to obviously get that information out right away. There are so many DACA recipients in our state who have been in our state for decades and are amazing members of our community. We know that their lives are here. We know, just like all other immigrants, they are just like us. We are them, they are us, and you all need our community. If you happen to be on here and you have DACA, but if anybody's an immigrant on here, we see you and you have our support, and we'll do whatever we can, right? But it takes a village, and we need all of your help. But yeah, Aspen, I'm going to chalk up DACA to just that new CIS director just trying to be bold and like scare people. Any other comments on DACA, Aspen, or from anybody?
No, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your good questions. Appreciate them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining today. I think
thanks so much.
Alita came off on camera, so I think she's telling us to knock it off when we're done.
Thank you everyone for joining. If there's any questions that we didn't answer, please feel free to email us again at the info@iowammj.org. We'd be happy to follow up. You can also call us at our main line, and all of the resources that we have here should be on our website as well. So please feel free to check that out and sign up for our weekly email. We'll be sending one later this afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks everyone.